Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Rose Red. Take my white rose, red everlasting, even when dead. I rose such as any other morning, ere tissled up be, set beside my gentle spouse. I fluently followed through the morning routine I was used to, when my ear caught wind of the doorbell. I stumbled over to the door, spilling coffee on the trip over cracking the door. I beheld a single red rose. Is this a joke? I whispered in my mind. I grasped the rose, ready to crush it as I crumpled nature's gift. I noticed something the color had bled off the rose onto my hand. Poi, white rose, red, in which love flows, in what is said. I waved goodbye as I set off on my journey for work. The commute wasn't a simple one. I had to ride a tram to the edge of town, then tread half a mile on foot as I strolled into my office. I discovered a red rose, not just any red rose, the one I had crumpled. As I gazed at the white and red Sprotsky rose, I felt an odd sensation of terror in my stomach. I concluded to force it down the paper shredder, seeing how this appeared to work. I was approached with a paperwork gift from my boss. Cry on my white rose, there to be with you, always there to be with you, sad. On my trip home, odd things started happening. Everyone possessed or depressed. Look upon their once joyful faces. I watched people trudge to stores in a zombie-like way. I felt scared as I stared at a sad, old woman passed out on the sidewalk. I hurriedly made my way home. Storm clouds now, engulfing the sky. As I approached my front door, I nearly cried. I now saw bits of whitened red of what used to be a rose. Love my white rose, red, so I may forever be with you, so I may forever dream with you, so I may forever love with you, all in the symbol. I lit a fire outside, feeling through on my decision to fry the remains. As I tossed the pieces of rose into the dancing inferno, a large wave of depression hit my heart. All of the color from my world appeared to fade into black and white. I entered my humble home and, to my surprise, found the remains of all my loved ones in a large pile. They all had one thing in common. They had no eyes. I then sat weeping over the defunct corpses of my now deceased family and friends. My life is over. I have nothing left to live, for this is the end. White rose stained red. The second story, family heirlooms. They say that madness runs in my family, but I would disagree. I would more likely say that my family, and its history, has been plagued by a series of grievously unfortunate events that took their tolls on the minds of my great-grandfather, my grandmother, and most recently, my father. It simply wasn't within our control. For example, great-grandpa Stephen wasn't always the sheltered recluse of a man that my mother used to tell me of. He was once a great role model and a brilliant biologist who womanized in his youth with his countless exploits of trips in the Amazonian jungles and Middle Eastern deserts that had amassed him a great wealth of exotic pets within his estate. But after his wife died, he became attached to the bottle and would lock himself up days on end, shouting to seemingly no one in his atrium full of insects and snakes. On the rare occasions she saw him, said my mother with a weak sigh, he rarely spoke a coherent word. He simply gibbered at his glassed eggs, as if the creatures crawling within understood his every word. They say it was due to a drunken accident that he was found in his mansion, dead, lying in a glass tank along with 5 fat-tailed scorpions. And then there was dear old Grandma Susan. I still remember when she would show off her marvelous sketches of the forest. I still remember when she was still a sweet old lady that would bake us cinnamon and raisin cookies, rich with brown sugar, and straight from the oven, so that they were still moist and hot. Of course, this was before one day she tried to feed my brother and me cookies with a fat, squirming cockroach baked into each one. I remember her protesting as my mother pulled us out of the kitchen. They're full of goodness and sweet dreams and chit-in. We never really saw her again. After that, no more trips to Grandma's. No more cookies, no more cockroaches. I don't know what it was with cockroaches. She started drawing those everywhere. I looked through her notebook during the funeral at her house after she was found beside a bottle of powerful roach killer. They were full of elaborate drawings of cockroaches and peculiar writings about swarms and buzzing in her ears. I miss Grandma, but I suppose everyone goes senile sooner or later. It couldn't be helped, she did look so calm in the casket, so dignified. She would have been proud to go that way. But my father, well, I'll admit, I'm not too sure about my father. He was always quiet, rarely reprimanded, almost never saying a word. I don't know why my mother married him. I don't know why they bother having my brother and me, because they so rarely even acknowledged we existed. I never knew quite what to think of him. I loved him, I suppose, despite everything he's done. I love him. I loved him when he put me to sleep as a child, when he gave me a rare smile after doing well in school, and when I came home to find my mother and brother strangled and collapsed in a pile in the backyard. My father was nearby playing with an anthill, watching the creatures run the lengths of his long, rough fingers. It's sad indeed, our family history. There's very little pride in holes where the insects grow, because here, family and fate means nothing, as all that matters is feeding the hive, feeding the king. But I suppose that our unfortunate incidents were inevitable acts of survival of the fittest. Our great-grandfather was a mighty man, but even cockroaches can be washed, and as greatly as they may try, those little ants cannot hope to escape the slaughter of the beautiful, invincible scarab. The claws and shell and wings and mandibles give me shivers every time I caress them, and that infinitesimal moment of tension where their carapace bends before it shatters beneath the tooth is exhilarating. Even in this soft cage, they still come to me in the silence to feed me, to give me a blessing from the king with feelers and legs and hooks. They say that madness runs in my family, but I would disagree. The scarab whispered otherwise as it burrowed into my brain. The third story, Steel Penny. Note: I massively improved this story recently. Please enjoy this now. Much more well edited. And say more FK et pasta. SPOILER. Contains vulgar language, suggested sexual acts between a father and daughter, and the death of a child. Do not like. Do not read. It was an average Saturday night, and I was bored as hell. Such is the story of my life. My parents were gone on their anniversary dinner, and my sister was out with her boy friend doing only God knows what with that loser. I was surfing the internet for random sites, and wasn't impressed with what I found, looking to scratch that itch for the weird so deeply embedded into my routines. So after an hour or so of looking at stupid old memes I'd seen a million times, or crap that wasn't even slightly weird like stupid LUL cats, and the like I then went on my old reliable YouTube. Upon seeing that simple red and white square at the top of the page, I did my typical practice of going on a favorites vid and finding some related videos on the side, just trying to kill the time before my parents arrived home with the takeout. I'd asked them to pick me up on the way home. I just happened to be a connoisseur of weird vids. I watch Salad Fingers and the like by the hour, so as you could probably expect, I have a bunch of rather odd vids on my faves list. So anyhow, I clicked on one of them, and in the related I find a video called Penny Avi. This intrigued me, as most videos are not left in their primitive form, instead being renamed before uploading. So I clicked on it, noting the ad date was just today. I was immediately greeted by an extremely loud metal sound, as I had my headphones on and the volume was about 70. This scared me pretty bad, making me virtually throw the headphones off my head, with the loud sound audible even through the headphones now sitting crooked on my desk. I quickly muted the VID and then turned my volume down, unmuting the video again. I was quickly greeted instead of by metallic scraping by the whispers of a little girl. I couldn't tell what she was saying, but she sounded angry and sad, at the same time, as though she were furious something had happened, and depressed about it. In the visual part of the video, I saw the girl sitting in the corner of a dark room. Judging by her silhouette, she looked about 12 years old, about 4'4", and what I could see of her, namely her arms, was very, very thin and gaunt, looking so thin she reminded me of the German POWs from concentration camps, just skin and bone, poor thing. There was also some sort of loose cloth over her torso, possibly a gown or a dress of some sort. The little girl was barely visible, as the room she was in was extremely dark. The video was also fairly grainy, almost like something like an old cassette camcorder or maybe a potato was used to film it. I checked for an HD or even SD option, but 200 for TYP was the highest. The only other option 140 for P, thinking that maybe this was a home video, and maybe the author forgot to set to private. I almost paused and went back to VID surfing when the girl clearly said my name. Now I know it could have been a coincidence, but no. When I looked back at the video, the girl was looking at the camera. She had hair in front of her face though, so I can't really say she was looking at the camera, but I can say she was facing it. Then she stood up. A clip from the possible video. At this time, I was getting pretty weirded out, and started a nervous tick of mine. I started to hum a happy little tune I had picked up from a cartoon I watch regularly, involving small, colorful talking equine, learning about friendship, and battling threats to their land. Back on the video, the little girl was just standing there facing the camera. She just stood there for a good 30 seconds, not moving, the only audio, a deeper toned breathing, likely that of a man now, being picked up by the camera, as well as the shallow, higher pitched breathing of what could only be the little girl. Then the camera person started moving towards the girl and I tensed up, the footsteps booming echoes, resonating in the small room and being picked up by the crappie mic. When the camera was about 5 feet from the girl, the camera person started zooming in on the little girl's midsection, and then zooming in on her right hand. As it got closer, I noticed she was holding something silver and shiny. As the camera zoomed in with the speed of a sloth, I guessed what it could be, a silver brooch. Perhaps a coin of some sort. Most coins are silver colored, after all. As the camera finally zoomed in and focused enough, I could tell that in her hand was a single coin despite the camera's constant twitching and movement. I could barely make out the face of Abraham Lincoln on the front and judged it was probably a US penny, but it wasn't your standard copper penny. It looked like a different variety, like some other sort of metal. I paused the VID to get a better look. It looked like a silver penny. The girl sat down in the chair again and started scraping the penny on the metal wall, causing that ear-wrecking sound again, and causing me to mute the VID. After I muted the VID, she then got up again and started walking towards the camera. Really fast, nothing superhuman mind you, but surely faster than a little girl should be able to move. When the girl came into the dim ceiling lamps, dirty yellow light more, I noticed she was in a plain pale yellow sundress and very warm brown shoes, judging by my history lessons, probably something similar to what would be worn in a 50s rural area. She was, as previously mentioned, extremely thin. Now that I could see her in the light, I could tell by her bones showing through her skin and her grey-zoned skin that she was likely either starving or anorexic. As soon as she was in view, the girl began scratching the ribbed steel wall rapidly with the coin, again raping my ears with that horrible sound of metal on metal. I almost mute the VID again, but she says my name again, and then something I can't quite make out, something was starting with Concame. Commander. Then the screen goes black for a second, and in the next frame the girl's on the floor in a crouched position with her hands and knees on the ground and her toes pressed against the floor, looking almost ready to pounce. Or something else entirely maybe. Then video just went black, but it still had 30 seconds left. All I heard was the girl's shallow breathing and the man's deeper breaths. Occasionally a soft moan for the girl or grunt from the man. At the 25-second mark, I suddenly heard the scraping sound again, followed by the girl's scream and a gunshot. I also heard one last thing was spoken before the video ended. The girl's voice said, "Coming." The video then went over, displaying the related video screen. At this point, I'm having a WTF moment. What did I just watch? How did it know my name? What did it mean by coming? Was she being raped? Was he or she coming? Should I report this video to the cops? Or something for possible incest? Or statutory rape and possibly murder too, judging by the gunshot? I tried to report the video to YouTube for sexual and violent content, but the webpage froze up and my browser tab refreshed to the YouTube home screen, leaving me quite puzzled. YouTube usually refreshed the video page and told you the video status, even if the video was removed from the site recently, not direct you to the home page. This was weird. After searching for the video again fruitlessly a few times, I figured the owner may have put it on private or unlisted and stupid ass me forgot to copy the URL link for it. Good job me. So instead of trying to find the video, I instead tried to find what the hell I'd what. Surely there was a meaning behind the video, right? First thing I considered was the coin she was holding. So I googled silver penny, and it came up with its normal 100. 0 results. Clicking on the most relevant link, I learned that penny was likely a steel penny. Steel was used during World War. I had to produce pennies instead of the more valuable copper, as copper was instead used for bullet casings and other supplies for the war. At this point, I was beginning to think of all the creepy pastas I'd read on these weird videos. I was really starting to freak out, almost hyperventilating, as waves of dread flowed through me. I stood up and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. telling myself aloud that this was nothing. I heard something like scraping in the kitchen, but I was convinced not to get scared. It was probably something stupid, like branches on the window, or maybe the ice machine or something. Fuck if I know. The moment I returned to my computer and sat down, my browser refreshed the page on steel pennies despite me not telling it to. What the fuck? What came up was instead an entirely new webpage that had photo scans of old newspapers and a subsection open in the 1940s. Convinced whatever was affecting my computer was a virus, I quickly went to open my antivirus to run a scan, but was interrupted with a notepad document opening, with 2 words popping up on my screen. Please? First. Totally freaked out, I felt compelled to oblige this request, the webpage almost forcing my attention on it again. I read the article of the first newspaper, in the listed typical war newspaper, reporting on the battles, troop losses, etc. But then my heart started its frantic escape attempts from my chest again when my eyes fell on an article. As I read through it, I found it was an article about the murder of a young girl in 1945, and intrigued by the date of the paper, I read it according to the article. A young girl named Penny Dolores Lewis was murdered on this date by who was suspected to be her 25-year-old father, and there were allegations of rape and incest between them, but none could ever be proven. This had occurred years ago, but on this date, August 5th, 1945. Before I could read any more of the story, my browser changed my cursor into a rotating blue ring. She was busy or changing pages. What came up after a brief pause was YouTube again, and the video's title was still Penny Avi this time. It was a totally different video. The girl was just standing in front of the camera, just staring into it, humming Sane Tonight was earlier. I freaked right the fuck out, tried to jump from my chair and run, but I couldn't move, my eyes glued to the screen against my will as that little shit kept staring into the camera, her sweet young voice beautifully humming that sweet little cartoon melody. Then the video started to get bloody. A loud scream and gunshot, replacing the soft humming as blood dripped onto her. And down the camera lens, everything virtually indistinguishable. All I could see was one larger from on top of another smaller, and very slight movements, possibly suggesting a struggle. The audio changed to high-pitched screaming, and crying a plea for forgiveness cut short by another loud gunshot. Then, silence, pure silence for a few seconds, until I once again heard a masculine groan from earlier. Oh my fucking god, was he? Everything got extremely blurry, until all I could see is a muddled red blur of movements and static, and the audio distorted to a bunch of high-pitched screams, this time masculine, and of the same tone as the male cameraman. Then suddenly, I heard the fucking scratching again. Oh fuck, that wasn't in the video, none of that was. I looked at the headphones on my keypad, and I see bolt of fear piercing my very soul at the realization. Another scrape along my wall behind me, the cracking of plaster, as that fucking coined into written, likely left an nasty gash in my wall. Something made me look again at the notepad document again, my eyes drawn to that one word that made my blood run cold. I felt a very intense pressure on both my genitals and throat at the same time as I read it, an excruciating crushing pain surging through me as I heard a soft box down below, and another from my throat. I spent the last moments of my life in total agony, my maleness crushed along with my windpipe, unable to breathe as waves of seething pain overtook me. Finally, a soft blackness consumed my vision. As my brain slowly died, faded to black from the intense pain combined with asphyxiation. The last thing I felt as my eyes closed being to small round metal objects being pressed onto my eyelids. Undoubtedly those fucking steel pennies. The last thing I remembered was those last words on my notepad document. Vengeance is sweet, Daddy. Second clip of the video.